And you don't like that movie? You don't like the movie where a horny cyborg German guy turns into a spider creature because a leprechaun injected him with spider DNA on a spaceship? You guys know what time it is? It is 3:05. You can't read what I just put up there. It's 3:05 in the morning on I guess this would be Tuesday now. It was a Monday. I think it's the perfect time to record my St. Patrick's Day special of Dante's Drive-In. It's gonna be about Leprechaun. I wore a silver shamrock t-shirt because it's St. Patrick's Day, but I don't have any crazy St. Patrick's Day decorations. I'm a bit of a nerd for the holidays, but for some reason I don't have a whole lot of St. Patrick's Day shit I can put out. And also, it doesn't help that even though we're talking about the Leprechaun films, NECA has, and actually any company for that matter, I'm pretty certain, all of them have neglected to give us a proper Leprechaun action figure, which is fucking outrageous. I'm pretty sure the fucking puppets from Puppet Master, no, I'm not pretty sure, I know for a fact, I have them sitting over there. The puppets from Puppet Master have action figures. I'm looking at my shelf right now, the Crooked Man from The Conjuring 2 has an action figure. The fucking Nun and Annabelle both have action figures up there. But Leprechaun is sitting on the fucking shelf, like not literally on the shelf, but he's sitting on like in someone's back pocket. No one wants to make an action figure of a horror icon who's appeared in fucking like over 7 movies, 8 movies I think. 8 fucking movies. And no one has decided to immortalize him in plastic form. As a collector of horror movie action figures, that is fucking ridiculous. That is an insult. I find it offensive that I even had to say that to you. But yeah, there's no such thing as a Leprechaun action figure as of this point. This is my plea to NECA, McFarlane, Trick or Treat Studios, whoever the fuck it is, Mezco, give us a proper Leprechaun action figure. I'm not talking about a Living Dead doll, okay? I want like I would take one of these, like a bobblehead type thing, or like even like a little 3 3/4 inch scale guy, okay? I don't want to have to make a custom out of like a fucking WWE Hornswoggle figure. I want a quality fucking Leprechaun figure. Not just that, I also want Leprechaun from individual movies, because he has different looks, which we're going to get into. I want to talk real quick about Leprechaun as a character, as an icon, because he really is quite fascinating to me. Out of the echelons of horror movie like icons, I have been a Leprechaun fan since I was about in 4th grade, and I would catch some of the Leprechauns on like the Sci-Fi Channel or Chiller, if anyone ever watched that. They always seemed to be on TV and I'd record them. There was also this weird thing where, because I was obsessed with like horror movie villains and stuff, and kids would pass around bullshit like lore at recess. And I don't know if anyone else remembers hearing this. Did anyone else hear that Leprechaun was like the son or some relation to Freddy Krueger? Because if you go by the lore of like what elementary school kids who just know what is shown on the covers of the DVD, you walked around in Blockbuster Video and you looked at them, and I promise I wasn't the one who started it. I even remember the kid. It was a kid named Ronnie. I'm not going to say his last name, but he was in like kindergarten. He told me, no, it was not kindergarten, it was 1st grade. He said, yeah, Freddy Krueger has a son named Leprechaun. And I guess they do bear somewhat of a resemblance. So I don't know, but we're going to try and be fair, we're going to try and be honest, but most of all, we're going to try and have fun. I really should get on topic, because it's St. Patrick's Day, and you're probably saying,
well, you can't do that voice. That's cultural appropriation of Irish culture.
Well, guess what, dumbasses? Little known Dante Graves fact, I am Irish. I'm at least 46% Irish. I'm pretty certain. It's 41 or 46. I don't know why I'm stuck between these two numbers, but I know it's in the 40s, and I know that all the other things that are comprised in my DNA are small enough that they're engulfed by the sheer magnitude of Irish that is within me. It's not something I'm proud of, but it is just an empirical fact about me. I am Irish. So I can do the voice if I want to, okay? I'm not going to for the remainder of this video, but we're going to be ranking the Leprechaun movies. This is fast and loose because it's 3 a.m. and I'm tired, and I just finished watching the films. I was going to just do a review of the Leprechaun films, but I think it'd be more effective to just rank them from worst to best going in descending order, because I want to end off on a high note. So without further ado, let's rank the fucking movies. Okay, so at the very bottom of my list, and this is not going to be a shock to anybody, is Leprechaun Origins. Leprechaun Origins is fucking stupid. I think the people involved in it should have their movie-making licenses revoked and be put in the fucking shadow realm. I don't think the actors should. They were just doing a job. Hornswoggle, I would have been exempted from that. I would have exempted from what I just said. But I saw an interview with him once. I'm gonna try and find it for the purposes of this, where he just like really shit on Warwick Davis.
Were you a fan of the original Leprechaun films?
No.
Really?
I've never seen any of them.
Really? Still haven't?
Still, no. I'm glad. Man, that sounds horrible, and I'm glad that I haven't seen the films, but I am. I would take that role compared to this one. I would take nothing from that role.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. The only similarity is the name. People are going to go into this thinking it's going to be that movie, or one of those movies, and they're going to walk out going, what was the name of that other guy that played the Leprechaun? And again, that sounds horrible to say, and I get some heat for that, but it's true.
Was there one sequence?
Stupid motherfucker.
I get it that just because you got hired for a role, you're not required to know everything about the franchise you're in, but he was just part of the problem, I feel, where he just didn't respect this character at all. And he just didn't fucking care. He didn't know what they were doing. No one knew what they were doing. No one knew the legacy of this franchise. And the fact that it's called Leprechaun Origins almost pisses me off more. If it had just been called Leprechaun, then I could have thrown it in the same boat as the Wrong Turn remake, which I also fucking hated, or reboot, whatever, where they're like, we're gonna take this title of this franchise that we basically have just assumed is dog shit, that nobody cares about, that there are zero fans for, and we're gonna make a completely unrelated movie that's also terrible in its own right, like on its own merits, is a piece of shit. And we're gonna make an unrelated movie that now is an asterisk in the franchise, where you just have to go, okay, now ignore that one, because that was just them dicking around. That's what Leprechaun Origins could have been. But because they called it Leprechaun Origins, it's in the cover of it, looks like a Leprechaun movie where he's like holding the gold. I remember seeing that DVD at Walmart and I'm like, oh my god, they made a new Leprechaun movie. And they said that Hornswoggle was taking over, and as a WWE fan as a kid, as a pro wrestling fan as a kid, I was like, oh, maybe, you know, it's interesting to see someone else fill that role, and especially someone who's a pro wrestler. It just did not work at all, on every level. I think everything about the movie is bad. There is zero to like about the movie. And I find its very existence, honestly, to just be offensive. I could get more angry about it and really rip this movie to shreds. I think that the biggest thing I can do against this movie, like to really prove to you how bad it is just to let you watch it for yourself and realize how fucking awful it truly is. Like, it really is an unwatchable pile of dog shit. And the fact that it's like so cynical and so mean to the franchise that preceded it, and to the actor that preceded it. Everything about it is bad. I have nothing nice to say about it. I think it's a completely reprehensible dog shit movie that should not exist. It should, if I could actually unmake the movie, I would. And if you like the movie, I think you're actively fucking brain damaged, and you shouldn't be allowed to watch movies or have an opinion. You're a fucking idiot. Don't say, well, they're trying to do something different. No. This movie's fucking dumb. It's dumb, okay? And yes, I could probably spend more time talking about it and explaining all the other reasons why, even if the rest of the franchise didn't exist and they called it something else, I would still think it's dumb, because I would, because it is a dumb movie that is a piece of shit movie. But it's the fact that they had the balls to call it a Leprechaun movie that makes it even more insulting to mine and everyone else's fucking time. Fuck Leprechaun Origins. It's only on this list because something had to be at the bottom. Moving on. Leprechaun in the Hood is my next one. I know a lot of people love this movie. I do see the appeal. There's a lot to like. I like Ice-T in the movie. I like his character. I like the main characters. They tend to wear me out by the end of the movie. Mostly because it starts to focus on them more than the actual Leprechaun, and just pacing is my biggest issue with it. Because I like the idea of the Leprechaun being in the hood, and I also find it very funny that In the Hood follows in space and also Las Vegas. So you went from the first movie, which is in the middle of fucking nowhere, then to New York City. He already skipped to the Jason Takes Manhattan part of the franchise. Then he goes to Vegas, which I don't think any other horror icon had done at that point. So Leprechaun was really breaking new ground. And then he went to space, which is like a cliche at this point, that like if a franchise has run out of ideas, they go to space. Even though not that many franchises have really done it. But he went to space, and then In the Hood, as if that was a logical next step for the franchise. Like, well, what can top space? The hood, obviously. So he's up in the hood, and he's hanging out with a bunch of gangsters and rappers. That's a fun idea. It just feels like this movie doesn't really capitalize on the concept as much as I would have liked it to. Back to the Hood has a lot of those same problems where it's like, what if the Leprechaun was smoking a bong? And like, I just don't find the appeal in that. But Back to the Hood I like better for other reasons we'll get to later. I don't know, Leprechaun in the Hood is kind of a rough sit just because I find it a little bit boring. A lot of the Leprechaun's kills, I can't even remember any specific ones that were really cool. It's also very anticlimactic. I suppose the climax of the film is the Leprechaun rapping, but yeah, I kind of require more from the movie than to just see the Leprechaun rapping. There's kind of this thing, I watched a video about it where, like, in that kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, a very hilarious joke that was in a lot of movies was a character who shouldn't be doing hip-hop, and that's the joke. You know, like the Dr. Evil doing hip-hop, that kind of thing. A lot of that happened in a lot of movies, and this was a movie that very much was leaning into that. And it just didn't even really feel... I guess, it's not that it doesn't feel like a Leprechaun movie. I just feel like it doesn't capitalize on its premise, and it's just kind of boring, which is really the worst thing a Leprechaun movie can do, is be boring. While there is stuff to like, I understand people liking it. I like the opening of the movie, and I like Ice-T in the movie. Warwick Davis seems to be trying his best, and I think the main characters themselves are fun. The movie, just by the end of it, typically that last half hour, I'm like, okay, is this about over? Because I want to go do something else. That's kind of my feelings on Leprechaun in the Hood. The next one is going to be Leprechaun the Original. That's going to be a controversial one. Typically, the first movie in a franchise is like their best foot forward. You know, so there are a lot of lists that will put Leprechaun towards the top. I'm sorry, while it is a movie I enjoy, it's still got one foot in trying to be a horror film and the other foot in trying to be a wacky comedy, and I just think it hasn't really found its footing in what a Leprechaun movie can be. It's not Leprechaun at its strongest yet. So while Warwick Davis is delightful in the movie, it's very memorable. The characters, like, you just kind of remember what all the characters look like. You even kind of remember their names and stuff. And there are some cool kills in it. It's just kind of pedestrian, especially compared to other things up farther on the list. So, yeah, it kind of sits at this weird kind of limbo point for me. It's definitely one that I've watched a lot, just because, like, if you're gonna watch a Leprechaun movie with someone else, it seems like that's the one I always go to, even though you could really watch any of these movies first, with the exception of probably Leprechaun Returns. And that's what's kind of awesome about the Leprechaun franchise, is, like, you know, canon, who gives a shit. We're gonna do whatever the fuck we want to do. If you're not down with it, then you just can't handle the speed at which the Leprechaun franchise goes. Like I said, the fourth movie in, they were already in outer space. You know, fifth movie in, they're in the fucking hood. The Leprechaun franchise went places no one else thought a horror franchise could go. And so the first movie is just so small, you know, and not quite wacky or crazy enough to be a really standout, like, gem of a movie. It's just kind of like, it was the start of it all, so it deserves, you know, respect, but I don't know. Compared to the things that came after it, it just seems so like, oh, okay, you know? So I don't have anything bad to say about it, other than it can just seem kind of like a drag at times. You would just rather be watching other Leprechaun movies. Next one on the list, I'm gonna go with Leprechaun 2. Right, kind of like in that middle area. I definitely like better than the first one. I think it's like a humongous leap above the first one. It's way faster paced. I like the characters better. I like the setting better. It's one of the only Leprechaun movies, actually I think it's the only one that actually takes place on St. Patrick's Day. So if you're gonna watch a St. Patrick's Day movie, this is probably the one. It's got, like I said, a better pace. You get a lot more of the Leprechaun. I actually really like seeing the Leprechaun in like ancient Ireland, or like, you know, like Ireland in the 1600s or whatever. That's cool. I like his unique look with like the cape and stuff. I even like kind of like just the redesign they give his clothes in general. It feels like they just put more effort into it. Like they're like, okay, Warwick Davis, Leprechaun, we really got something here. Let's go. You know, let's do everything that we were kind of afraid to do in that first one in this one. And it's also kind of like more of the stupid cartoon bullshit from the first one, like the really cartoon shit, like him smacking through a wall and his outline being there, or him driving a go-kart, like that kind of stuff that I thought was kind of dumb. That stuff's gone, and in place we get the Leprechaun being a lot more vicious. I like the parts where the Leprechaun feels like actually dangerous, and Leprechaun 2 has those moments. There is definitely some questionable performances, but, you know, like, are you really gonna watch a Leprechaun movie and complain that the acting was bad? It just feels kind of foolish. However, what was the girl's name? I don't remember her name, but there is a woman in this film who's exceptionally bad. And it's almost like amusing how bad she is.
Where I'm watching Leprechaun 4, but that gave me a good chuckle. Yeah, she's like, Cody, stop. I'm just like, oh god.
So, I don't know. Leprechaun 2 is like, there's at times certain line delivery borders on like Troll 2 levels of hilarity. And like I said, that's good though, because you're like more amused by it. It still has some pacing issues. It's not quite like a every minute is just hilarious kind of territory, but it's a lot better than the first one. I think if you're gonna go with one or the other between those first two movies, Leprechaun 2 blows the first one out of the water. This is a controversial pick from what I have seen. And you know, the higher up we're getting on the list, we're gonna get more into those, because I think my list does not really sync up with a lot of other people's, of us Lep fans. I think mine is deviates a bit from what the general consensus is about the Leprechaun franchise. Leprechaun Returns. I like it better than the original. I like it better than Leprechaun 2. I like it better than In the Hood. I obviously like it better than Origins. This is just like a breath of fresh air to me after Leprechaun Origins, especially. Like, I was so glad that that's not the direction going forward. That we were like, okay, that was weird and dumb. We never want to do that again. That was not Leprechaun. We're terribly sorry. Here's an actual Leprechaun movie as a consolation prize. And not only that, it's a pretty damn good one. Whatever his name is, Porco. I know his last name is Porco. I'm pretty sure, at least. I'm gonna feel like an asshole if it isn't. That guy does a great job. I would like to see him be the Leprechaun again. Sometimes you can't really understand what he's saying. His voice is a bit different. The makeup is a bit heavy on him, but I really like the look of the Leprechaun in this movie. I like the like longer coat look to him. He's a lot more dirtier. He's kind of probably the scariest looking he's been in any of the movies. I really did like, I think this is gonna be controversial. I really like the look of him probably the best in this movie. And you get a lot out of him. Like they knew they had a really good replacement for Warwick Davis. Warwick Davis was just kind of too old to do the part, or was disinterested. That motherfucker's got Harry Potter money now. He doesn't need the Leprechaun franchise, which is too bad, because that is an iconic character that I think he really did make his own. He's like the Robert Englund of the Leprechaun franchise. He's always going to be what set the standard, and the Leprechaun of which all future Leprechauns will be compared to. Granted, we've only had two since him. The new guy in Leprechaun Returns, I think he did a great job. I definitely would not be upset if he continued to play Leprechaun after this. I think he was great. This movie's not afraid to really have fun with the kills. There's like some really shockingly awesome gory kills in this movie. I kept being like, oh damn, like they're really going for it. And one thing I like about it is that a lot of the Leprechaun movies, especially kind of like Leprechaun 2 and 3 in the first one, the kills are so like abstract and magical that they're kind of like just they're putting a little bit too much thought into them. And I like this just kind of simpler approach to these ones, where something wacky that could only happen because a leprechaun is doing it, but it's still like the commitment to showing it and how horrifying it would be. I like that. Pretty much all of the kills in the movie are awesome, and they're on screen, they're practical, they're just really well done. Even like ones that are, I guess, quote unquote, stupid, are really entertaining to see, you know, and you could tell that everyone behind the camera was like, we want to make a very entertaining Leprechaun movie, and we want to remind people how fun these movies can be. It tries to do kind of like the Halloween 2018 thing, where it ignores the others and, you know, continues after that, but really it works with the rest of them because the Leprechaun franchise is always kind of implied that there's more than one Leprechaun. They all just kind of look a certain way, so that's fine. This is just the Leprechaun specifically from the first movie coming back in this one. So that makes perfect sense to me. I guess if I had a complaint, I would just say that all of the characters are very unlikable, with the exception of the Leprechaun himself. So when they're getting killed though, you're like fine with it. You're rooting for the Leprechaun. The main character especially, just her charisma is dog shit. And they give her these like witty little quips, and her delivery of them I just think kind of sucks. And the Leprechaun himself is not as funny as he is in other movies. I think partially because the prosthetics sort of hinder the performance, but I don't know, when he's killing people and he's running around doing leprechaun shit, I was very entertained, more so than the previous films on the list. And I think it's an interesting direction, and I hope we get to see more of them. It's been a while though, so I don't know if we're gonna get to see Leprechaun Returns again, you know, which is too bad. I like that this franchise is like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise and is just constantly on life support. This, from the fucking second movie out the door, they were already doing direct-to-DVD movies and straight-to-TV movies and Sci-Fi Channel original premieres, and like, this franchise has always been at the fucking bottom of the barrel, but just keeps chugging along. So let's not let the flame go out. Leprechaun 9, damn it. I'll direct it, hire me. I like the Leprechaun franchise, and I bring back Mr. Porco as well. I think he's great. I would love to see him return as the Leprechaun. I think we could really make sparks fly. Next, we got Leprechaun Back to the Hood. That's interesting that that's so high up, and I'm amazed myself. I've kind of put it in, and I'm like, okay, well, I gotta get this one over with. And when I watched it a while back, I was not a fan of it at all. I thought it was very boring. But when I was rewatching it for the purposes of doing this list, because I've watched all of them over the last couple weeks, Leprechaun Back to the Hood, man, I don't know. It hit way different. I wasn't even paying attention to it, but it kept sucking me in and like demanding my attention. What I really liked especially was, after all the other ones, this is the first kind of Leprechaun movie I really recall where the Leprechaun is killing people with his like bare hands or with weapons. Like he's putting up a fight. There's a scene where he fights, like physically fights 2 cops and like rips one's leg off and clubs the other one to death. I like seeing that. I like the redesign for Warwick Davis. I like his new look. I loved the characters in the movie. I was with them all. I rooted for them. I was rooting for the Leprechaun. They put the Leprechaun in a bunch of really interesting scenarios we hadn't seen him in before. This felt like the Leprechaun in the Hood movie we should have got the first time around. It was just a huge improvement over that concept, and it's one that I'm definitely going to remember as like honestly, these top 3 movies I would describe as like peak Leprechaun, like top Leprechaun content. I think that's Leprechaun in its prime. And Leprechaun Back to the Hood just really shocked me that it would even crack the top 3. So I think it's just a great send-off for Warwick Davis as this character. He really got to go out strong, and I like the characters. It's never really boring, which is the best thing I can say about any of these. You know, it's got all the blood, the sex, and the violence that you're gonna want out of a Leprechaun movie. There's not much else I can say about it, except it's also, like I said, it's set in the Hood. So if you want a good Leprechaun in the Hood experience, go with Leprechaun Back to the Hood. I don't know, the second time was the charm for this one. Leprechaun 3 is my number 2 pick, which now, again, controversy, because most people, most reasonable people, would agree that Leprechaun 3 should be number 1. However, I am not a reasonable man. I'm an insane person that hunts monsters for a living, okay? Leprechaun 3 is a fucking trip. It's definitely the best of the original 3. I mean, it's the top here. But like out of those kind of like, I don't know, Leprechaun 4 felt like a departure from what the first 3 were, if that makes sense. And out of that kind of like original trilogy of Leprechaun movies, Leprechaun 3 was like the perfection. They finally understood what a Leprechaun movie needs to be. You need to have your interesting characters to kill off, like, but they gotta be fun, they gotta be memorable, they gotta be wacky, they gotta be just very charismatic. They gotta make their impact, you know, because they're gonna have to outact Warwick Davis, which is gonna be a near impossible Herculean level feat. So you gotta have characters that can keep up with him. You gotta have wacky fucking ways for the Leprechaun to kill people. You need to have an interesting setting, a setting we haven't seen before that the Leprechaun can really gel with. You gotta have an interesting premise, as in like you can't just have every time the Leprechaun's gold is missing and he wants his gold back. This one with the whole like monkey's paw effect where the coin passes hands and people make wishes off of it, that's interesting and it lets us interact with a lot of unique different characters around the place. And also, with it being set in Las Vegas, we get a lot of unique interaction for the Leprechaun to be in. It's a great setting for him to really fuck shit up in. It never really has any dull moments. It's got likable characters. Like I said, Warwick Davis, he gets a lot of time to shine in this movie. And it's got a lot of stuff that we hadn't seen before. It continues, it never feels like it's waiting around for something to happen. You know, it's always going. It's always trying like, okay, now we're going to move to this next scene where we have this really fun idea to show you this time. You know, a guy gets turned into like a leprechaun-like creature. There's a magician that the leprechaun kind of has like a dueling magic act with. There's a lot of great kills in it. There's a lot of sex, violence, a lot of Warwick Davis. What more can you really ask for? This is probably the best Leprechaun movie. It's just not my personal favorite. That honor is going to go to Leprechaun 4 in Space. Leprechaun 4 in Space is a masterpiece. It's everything I said about all the other previous Leprechaun movies, where it needs to be just insane. It needs to be a new idea every minute. It needs to be a cast of characters that are all memorable, that can keep up and, you know, match the charisma and the energy, at least the best they possibly can, with the Leprechaun himself. It needs to be an interesting setting. Every single thing I said that I want out of a Leprechaun movie, Leprechaun 4 has. It's got great kills. It's got great characters. It's got memorable characters. It's got a great setting. A setting we've never seen the Leprechaun in before. It does really everything with that space concept. And not only that, when you're marathoning these, Leprechaun 1, 2, 3, 4 in order, like the way I did, Leprechaun 4 really hits different because it's got something the first 3 don't have, and that's proactive characters. In the first 3 movies, it's like the Leprechaun is the proactive character and everyone else is just trying to not get fucked by the Leprechaun, or they're trying to just be greedy assholes, you know. Leprechaun 4 is the first one where we've got a team of like space marines that are actively trying to kill the Leprechaun. That doesn't happen in any of the other movies. Not to, at least to this extent. It's literally like, they're like, we're gonna make aliens, except there's no aliens, it's just Leprechaun. Who I guess is an alien in this movie. But like, I just really like that concept. It's just the least boring at all. It's the most, from beginning to end, entertaining installment in the franchise. It's got sexy characters, it's got gory kills, it's got wacky side characters, it's also got other monsters. The spider creature thing is so fundamentally Leprechaun, but also is not a Leprechaun character. Like, it's just something new to see. And they really go for it. The Leprechaun becomes giant, and with his whole like Napoleonic thing he's got going, that's so awesome to see. And he's fighting this like ripped fucking like gun, commando, echo team, move out, and he's like fighting that guy. Like, that's just, oh my god, it's just so fucking genius. I love the characters in the movie, especially like the main 3 characters. No, I don't remember their names, but the jacked guy, the sexy blonde chick, and who's a scientist, I guess, and then the funny black guy who was, I'm pretty sure, is Damon in Friday the 13th Part 5, who, I loved him in that movie. You get more of him in this one, and he's a fucking space marine. You get a crazy, horny, German cyborg that turns into a spider creature. And you don't like that movie? You don't like the movie where a horny cyborg German guy turns into a spider creature because a leprechaun injected him with spider DNA on a spaceship, and then he rips off the Trish Stratus scientist blonde chick's pants, and the last 30 minutes of the movie she's in her underpants running from a spider creature while the leprechaun is giant and is trying to fight this G.I. Joe character on the space deck. It's an insane movie for an insane franchise, and honestly, it's just the Leprechaun movie I watch the most because it's got everything I want the most out of it. It seems like everyone in this movie is having the most fun. No one seems embarrassed to be there. No one's like, oh, Leprechaun. Because they didn't sign on to Leprechaun 4 in space expecting it to do anything for them. You know what I'm saying? Everyone knew why they were there, and they're like, I'm gonna give the best Leprechaun 4 in space you could fucking imagine. They all tried their best. Leprechaun 4 in space just has a lot of heart. And at the end of the day, that's all we can ask from a Leprechaun movie, is to give us heart and entertainment, you know? I don't know. Just check it out. If you're gonna watch one Leprechaun movie this St. Patrick's Day, it's the one I recommend. If you're a normal person, you're gonna watch Leprechaun 3. But really, any of these are fun, except Leprechaun Origins.